Assalamu alaikum. Do you hear me, guys? And I don't hear anything.
Okay, you should be in the English channel.
Okay.
Dr. Munzer, you know the interpretation button on the down, on the main Zoom screen. When you look down,
How do I reach that?
you can choose the English channel.
Where? I don't see any channels to choose.
Interpretation.
Where
Can you
is
hear
it?
me, Dr. Munzer?
Oh, under interpretation.
Yes, English channel and mute original audio.
Abi şu anda neredesiniz? Ben ilk başta göremiyorum sizi ama.
English.
Can you hear me now?
Well, English. I hear you now. It says English channel, but I don't see any
Evet. Hemen üst kata çıkılacak abi.
Zoom audio.
Üst kat zaten çıkmak görülecek.
Tamam. Okay. Tell me when you're ready.
You can start, Dr. Saini.
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to day 2 of our symposium examining domestic, economic, and foreign policies and performance of the AK party. This is our 8th symposium. As I said yesterday, we had a series of symposia for the past 15 months or so. We've done Sudan, Egypt, Iran, Tunisia, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Libya, Algeria, Yemen, Palestine, and Lebanon. And this weekend, we are doing Turkey, which will make it our 17th experiment in 8 symposia. We have 2 more to go with 10 more countries. And the goal of this series is to understand as much as possible in details the study of the experiences and performance and policies of movements within their own countries, within Muslim majority countries. Today, this is our 2nd day. We have 2 sessions. Our 3rd session is titled Socioeconomic Policies and Performance. And we have 3 esteemed scholars with us to discuss the issues related to this theme. We have a presentation by Dr. Mehmet Babacan from the Türkiye Central Bank. He is also an associate professor at Istanbul Medipol University, and his presentation will be on economic policies and performance. We also have a presentation by Dr. Murat Yash from Marmara University on the politics and development of Islamic finance in Turkey. And thirdly, we have a presentation by Dr. Mehmet Fatih Aysan from Marmara University on poverty and socioeconomic policies and performance. We'll also, after the first 2 presentations, we're going to have a discussant, Dr. Munzer Qaf from Istanbul Sabahuddin Zaim University. Let me introduce each presenter very briefly. Dr. Mehmet Babacan is an associate professor at Istanbul Medipol University in the Department of Economics and Finance. His research fields are international political economy, development economics, governance, and business networks and interest groups. His current research is on the performance of Turkish firms and industries in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Besides his working on sustainable businesses and the impact of Green Deal on the SMEs. Dr. Babacan earned his bachelor's degree from Marmara University and master's degree from Clemson University in South Carolina, United States. He obtained his PhD degree at Marmara University with a dissertation titled The Role of Institutions and Governance in International Trade. Throughout his academic career, he has been a researcher and leader of several research projects. He also served in the Prime Minister's office between October 2014 and September 2018 as an advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister. Dr. Babacan is currently a member of the Auditing Committee of the Central Bank of the Republic of Turkey since 2015. Our second presenter, Dr. Murat Yash, is an assistant professor at the Institute of Islamic Economics and Finance at Marmara University. He's also a visiting fellow at the Institute of Asian, African, and Middle Eastern Studies at Sophia University in Japan. He's completed his master's degree and PhD degrees in Islamic finance while obtaining his bachelor in economics at Boğaziçi University. I think his PhD from INSEAD. He was also a visiting graduate student at the University of Reading in the UK. His research interest focuses on financial markets, Islamic finance, and Asian studies. Our third presenter is Dr. Mehmet Fatih Aysan, who's an associate professor of sociology at Marmara University and the director of the Center for Population and Social Studies. He earned his PhD from the University of Western Ontario in 2011 and taught sociology at the same university. He previously served as faculty member in the Department of Sociology until 2020 and the director of the Graduate School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Istanbul Shahir University. His sociological interests are rooted in the intersection of demography, family, sociology of work, and social policy. His study centers on how demographic changes, labor markets, and social policies combine to influence the welfare of societies. His research projects were supported by many institutions, including TUBA, European Union, IDRC, and TÜBİTAK. Dr. Aysan's work appeared in edited books and peer-reviewed journals such as Routledge, Belgrave, Springer, Population and Development Review, Canadian Journal of Sociology, and Emerging Markets and Finance. Our discussant, Dr. Munzir Qahif, is currently a professor of Islamic finance and economics in the Faculty of Management and Economics at Istanbul Sabah ad-Din Zaim University here on campus. He taught at the graduate program of Islamic finance at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Doha, Qatar for about a decade until 2018. And the graduate program of Islamic economics and banking, the School of Sharia at Yarmouk University in Jordan in 2004 and 5. He served as a senior research economist at the Islamic Research and Training Institute at the IDB, Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah, in the mid-90s, and was a visiting professor at the graduate program of Islamic finance at INSEAD Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. He wrote 35 books and more, and published more than 80 articles and scores of conference and encyclopedia entries on Islamic finance and banking, on awqaf, on zakat, and other areas of Islamic economics. I want to welcome our presenters and our discussant, and thank you so much for being part of this elaborate and hopefully detailed study and examination. And we will start with our first presenter, Dr. Babajan.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I hope everyone can hear me properly. I'll try to do my best in order to be both intact with regards to time and try to cover up much of the stuff that I was today intending to do. This is going to be basically a perspective on the real, or just taking a real sector perspective on the overall course of the Turkish economy. And pretty much it's going to be on the last 2 decades, since the earlier AK Party periods up to an end, and these times right after the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think I'll be elaborating my presentation over here on several points, and I'll be basically trying to focus over the Turkey's expansion as a rising power, an emerging power over the last course of the 2 decades, and also that's going to actually have couple of different dimensions into it. First part obviously would be related to the trade-wise expansion, and second part would be the rise of the Turkish state as being a soft power throughout vast extension of its donations or foreign aid. It's going to also a little bit touch upon Turkey's new foreign policy stance. Even though we've got several different episodes within the last 2 decades, it's going to be a general approach to understand Turkey's new view over its foreign policy in order to find out new alliances throughout different geographies. And also it's more of becoming vocal in terms of international governance throughout the United Nations, throughout the different international institutions as being the founding member. And that wise, the first part would be quite related to the Turkey's rise as an internationally more influential power, and obviously still remaining as an emerging market economy. And second part, I'd rather want to emphasize would be about Turkey's efforts pretty much taking place in the second decade, and mostly evident after the political regime change right after 2018. It's kind of efforts to revitalize the industrial sector or reindustrialization efforts, which kind of with a focus over the role of or increased role of the SMEs, as well as several frontier industries such as the defense industry. And finally, I would like to address a little bit close to basically the fundamental issues or the structural weaknesses that the country still actually suffers, and somewhat related to the business cycles or the financial trends also throughout the world economy. So being attached and pretty much integrated to the rest of the world over the course of the 2 decades, I think it's going to be rather more meaningful right now to discuss Turkey's stance and I mean Turkey's position with all the changes, the fundamental changes in the world economy overall, but also with a special emphasis over the structural weaknesses of its own. So I think I'll try to make I myself attached to this 3 basic categories or 3 basic pillars that I want to discuss a little bit. So beginning with what I would call as being the first round or first episode of Turkey's rise, and we also share over here, and expectedly I was intending first to do this presentation in Turkish. As far as I got this information that we had simultaneous translation, but obviously doing this in English would be lower down the transaction cost in many terms. So we'll do it. And unfortunately, all those graphs, and the graphs might be speaking by themselves. I mean, no matter what the language is, but you may read out from this first one. Let me have it on my computer as well, so I'd rather know what I'm talking about. So this is all about the GDP, the nominal GDP in obviously the US dollars terms over years. And I mean, at a glimpse, you might already have felt that it was doing okay by the end of the first decade, but then it's like more like fluctuating. And in the second one, it's more obvious. If you just put this, please. Thanks so much. So this is one actually per capita income, again, according to the purchasing power parity in the US dollars terms. And the orange color, yes, it's orange, right? The orange color refers to the annual growth rate for the Turkish economy, again for the same period, last 2 decades. So you may feel out, several, occasions that the economy was actually doing bad, and those periods are closer, associated with either its own structural issues or worldwide crisis. The first one, for instance, right on the left, refers to the biggest banking and financial crisis of Turkey back in late 2000s and 2001. This the one in the middle refers to the great financial crisis back in 2008 and its impact over the Turkish economy, which pretty much became evident by the next year. So for the next course of the next decade, a decade long a positive growth rate, and with all this incidence of the or the effect of the great financial crisis, I think the economy was doing in these terms was doing quite okay. But the fluctuation over here is actually leading the economy, making the per capita income actually a little bit volatile. And by the end of 2013, unseen unfortunately over here, but we were talking about a per capita income of $12,000 US. I think it was like $12,400 US back in 2012 or 13. And for the next 10 years period, right now we've been talking about like $10,000 US. A little bit maybe lower or above, but it certainly refers to the case of this mid-income trap. So that's somewhat the way that we see this, but definitely refers to certain structural issues in the Turkish economy, and we'll be touching upon those very much into the very details in the third section. But rather, with all these figures, the initial ones, I'd like to emphasize how it kind of became visible of the Turkey's rise as a middle economic power. So, Professor, if you just can, these are actually quick comparisons with Turkey's peers, with some, just a few exceptions. Like we've got some of the advanced economies over here, like Germany, the UK, Japan. The US, to some extent, you may cite Korea. But even though these also have got their figures over here, we've got still a lot of Turkey's peers in emerging market among the emerging market economies, and this particularly refers to the value added of the industrial sector for those economies within the GDP. What you may have got noticed is that Turkey is, doing pretty much okay. I mean, it's not that much of, industry or the manufacturing industry oriented country, but it's certainly, have not become, fully inclined towards being a, services economy. So services industry is doing quite well in the terms that it's, growing at a much faster pace compared to the others. But certainly the manufacturing industry still actually does certain amount of value added to the GDP. And this actually becomes even more visible in the export figures of the country. If we can just get into the other one, and this is and the first one or the previous one was referring to the share of the industry in the GDP, but this one is just about the manufacturing industry. So it might be the case that this one has made it more visible in terms of the share or the role of the manufacturing industry in Turkey's GDP. So you may read out quite the same. The number of the countries are pretty much the same. From the left-hand side up to the right-hand side, we've got Brazil, China, Germany, the UK, with one of the lowest in terms of the share of the manufacturing industry from the GDP. And we've got several emerging market economies like Indonesia, India, then comes Japan, Korea, one of the highest, and then it's Mexico, Poland, Russia, and Turkey. The two of them to the right of Turkey are the US and the South African economies. So it's still doing okay. And these are pretty much the years before and after COVID. So the data is gathered from the World Bank by 2022. So you may read out from these two actually is just or pretty much the justification of my arguments for the second part or the second pillar of my discussion, which is kind of about the efforts of revitalizing the industrial sector. So yeah, the next one is something quite again related with the share of the industrial sector, and this one is it's about the number of or the share of employment in the manufacturing industry. Again, Turkey is not doing that great, but it's okay compared with some of the major advanced economies at least. But among its peers, I think it's quite comparable with what Poland is doing in terms of the share it's got, or Korea, and even Mexico. It's very fragile. I mean, I'm sorry, Russia. Poland is doing well beyond, much better than its peers in that regard. Well, obviously, to some extent, it's all about the main economic actors' giant investments taking place in Poland so far. Like Germany and others, they've been investing a lot in manufacturing in Poland, thanks to vast amounts of incentives. So these are all about, and finally, we've got another one. The next one is, again, this time only about Turkey. It's easy to figure out that the one in the middle refers to the share that the services industry takes, and it's obviously expanding over time. Now we have reached a little bit, below the 60% share. I mean, so this one is all about the share of employment, not the value added or the total output of the industrial sector, but rather it's all about the share of employment. So obviously it's much visible over here that the industrial or the manufacturing industry basically. Yeah, it's not doing great, but I mean, when compared to its 20 years before, its share that it got 20 years before now, like earlier 2000s, it remains pretty much stagnant. I mean, hasn't changed a lot. So it's like 20%, 27%, 26, 25, somewhere in between. So pretty much stagnant, more or less stable over here. What we lose from, obviously, is from the agricultural industry in terms of the share, the employment share it gets. Now, again, I was pretty much referring to Turkey's rise in terms of its foreign trade. It's been effective quite a lot. And you may read out those numbers, obviously, from this graph now, but it's not only about the numbers. I'd like to refer to a couple of cases that are, to my own opinion, behind this kind of tremendous increase in Turkey's foreign trade, despite the fact that it's not that much changed in terms of its total share from the world total trade. But yet we've got something also in change in terms of its momentum over time. On two folds, I may cite this. The first one is about the foreign policy. The kind of the pretty much better match of the overlapping of its foreign policy as well as the foreign trade. Despite several issues, more or less political issues about this, the FETÖ, the so-called FETÖ organization and their role in the very first decade in somewhat, quote unquote, promoting Turkey's trade overseas, and several businessmen's association. These are, have become more or less controversial issues, but if other than this, altogether there's a new inclination of Turkey towards new geographies in terms of diversification of its export markets, as well as there is pretty much an effort for a diversified set of goods and services also to becoming exported to the rest of the world. And the first part about this foreign trade issue is that therefore about an aggressive actually penetration to new geographies, like opening up new embassies. Now, if I'm not wrong, it's been more than 50 embassies already in African continent so far, and also obviously several bilateral investment agreements, etc. were all taking place with those, and even Turkey has become in some of the regional economic cooperation or group of countries or unions in Africa, and Turkey has joined as an observer so far. Even to the African Union. So that kind of penetration to new geographies was quite important. Even the Turkish Airlines new destinations already picked up again after the COVID-19. So this kind of stuff were altogether was being effective in Turkey's extension to new geographies, becoming more influential through trade, several businessmen. So this was altogether, it was like, more or less the manifestation of the efforts behind. The second is all about, the domestic kind of change. And to me, the most important part was all about the SMEs role, especially, of course, with a significant blow into this effort came through the civil war broke up in Syria for the last decades now, even more. It's been like 12 years already. And inshallah it's going to get in soon and end soon. But what we have observed up until that time was it was a almost geometric increase, a significant increase in number of SMEs in terms of becoming exporters. Usually they were all located in southeastern Turkey. To some, they also developed certain capacity in Western Anatolia as well. But those SMEs, turning out to be exporters right now, they also had to meet several challenges and certain criteria to become so. Not limited to the cross-border trade, but also they have developed a certain capacity to become direct exporters to, let's say, to the European Union. And what we all know about the case of Turkey and the European Union relations, it at least provided a certain ladder of quality for Turkish SMEs. So these SMEs have had to meet certain criteria, both in terms of the quality of their products and their practices, up to even invoicing practices. So there are some certain standards that these guys had to meet. So, and they become really able to do so. So there's a certain capacity out doing there. I didn't include those specific figures in these slides right now, but if you go and check the role of the SMEs, both in terms of their share from the GDP, that's not going to change quite a lot, but just a very insignificant rise over time. But their role, direct and indirect, actually from the exports, is on the rise. So the SME part, to myself, to my own perspective, is an important one. Obviously, it's not the SMEs at the end, usually, which does the export, but certainly they are doing some kind of greater business with the big guys that do the export, and some of them have emerged being or becoming direct exporters to the rest of the world. That figure, right after this figure, implying this tremendous increase in Turkey's trade volume, and we've got the share of Turkey's trade from its GDP also being on the rise. The services trade been more or less stagnant, having a share around 10% over time. But we've got, the manufacturing industry doing quite good. So its share actually is continuously on the rise. Now, the remaining couple, the next couple slides are all about that, trade perspective I was just referring to. This first one is the so-called Herfindahl-Hirschman export market penetration index. So it's like something that when it goes down, you actually find out more diversification of the export markets. So it's significantly changing over the course of this last 2 decades. What we have seen so far is that Turkey has now become an exporter to even Far East, some markets in Latin America, in South America, to the very remote geographies in Africa even. So that kind of well, obviously, the total amount of trade is not that great yet, but as long as that kind of export market orientation has changed or diversified at least, I think it's going to be quite a significant help in the long run. And this is about the penetration index. I'm sorry for making the two a little bit confused, but this one about Turkey's penetration index to its already existing export markets. And obviously, contrary to the previous one, once the figures are going up in this one, it's quite to the benefit of the country. So the country is now more able to penetrate in those existing export markets over the course of the last 2 decades. And on the right edge, obviously, it's all about the effect of COVID-19. It's supposed to be picking up again, and we'll figure those out pretty soon, I think, from the international figures. Another slide, again related with Turkey's trade. It's now this time referring to the case of the EU predominantly. Now, why I'm trying to focus on the case of the EU on two folds. First of all, as much as we speak about Turkey's foreign trade and economic orientation to the rest of the world, it's not only about the trade, obviously, a lot going on in terms of bilateral investments, etc. also. But the role of the EU has been important, and it seems that it's going to remain being important in the short run. So those figures right behind for both of the graphs, on the one on the left, it's about Turkey's exports. The one on the right is about Turkey's imports. So it's quite evident that the role of the EU actually remains still high for Turkey's foreign trade. But despite this, obviously, we've got a significant increase in the Asia, the share of Asian countries, of course, foremost China and several other great bigger economies. So I think, yeah, I'm making quite I think more than expected on my case over foreign trade over here, but I'll try to cut it short. So this one and the next slide is referring to this time the the European Union's biggest trade partners. This one is about the European Union's export to the rest of the world, and Turkey is being placed in 5th. And in the second one, the following one, actually, again, you may find out Turkey becoming again being located in the 5th rank in terms of the EU or the Euro 19 countries, more specifically, import from the rest of the world. Now, having spoken a lot about the foreign trade, I think we've got now to say a little bit more on, several other indicators. Like this time, this is about the net foreign direct investment to the country in terms of its share from the GDP. And this blue colored ones, they all are referring to the nominal figures in terms of the US dollar, of course. This orange line actually refers to its share from the GDP. It's very much volatile over the course of the both actually decades. There are some certain shocks again becoming visible, quite in line with the the developments taking place in the world economy. If you just can focus over, let's say, what happened in between 2008 and 11, for instance. There's a sharp decline in the foreign direct investment, although Turkey was doing pretty good in those years, and that's pretty much all about the great financial crisis and the European debt crisis just following up. So there's a sharp decline over the 2 years period over there, and of course, finally on the right, you would find out. Again, another sharp decline, this one due to the COVID-19 pandemic, pretty much. But despite this volatility, we've got still pretty good, numbers and figures compared to the previous periods of the Turkish economy. For the last 2 decades, the economy is doing therefore good, despite all the volatility. Again, another graph referring to the foreign direct investment. This time it's the foreign direct investment accumulated, the total amount actually. The one on the top, obviously, and this figure is actually dividing the foreign direct investment among in reference to its source. So with the regional, of course, perspective, the EU 27 countries, as a region, is the first one, followed by the Asian economies and the ones in the Middle East, and particularly the GCC countries. So you may find out a greater actually portion or share of those countries. It means that some of the FTIs have been already taking place in the country. They were withdrawn back to several other places or different geographies across the world. 88 billion just from the EU 27 countries. Yeah. So we've got, this is, if it is not, too ambitious to say or unrealistic, I hope it's not unrealistic at all. This has also something to do with the COVID-19. As far as we now read out from different angles, of course, there's a significant trend to more regionalism, to more actually or less globalization. So, shortening of the global supply chains, etc. So this has, to my own perspective, has got something to do with this. Second, obviously, might be quite related with the domestic changes in Turkish economy. For some of the firms, with the perspective of lowering down or just declining earnings from Turkey might be the reason. But second one has to be closely associated with the overall trend of regionalism and less globalization. Really, I'm sorry. just coming into an end in terms of my slides, but yeah.
Foreign investment goes into what? Construction, industry, agriculture, banking, global investment growth, and $60 billion, a lot of money.
Yeah. It was pretty much by the end of the first decade, around 2010s, more than 60% of it was pouring down to the financial industry. So it's pretty much a little bit diversified for the last couple 3 years, right before and beginning before the pandemic. But right now you may consider this pretty much diversified in many terms. For instance, even the share of the startups and relatively small scale firms is on the rise in Turkey. So in terms of attracting foreign capital, so this is obviously you may just read out those from different and variety of sources like Ministry of Industry, or even to some extent you can read out those from the flows to some of the industrial companies that are already. This is investment, yes. This is all about the investment to the country. But this is, of course, accumulated number over the course of 20 years. Now, despite all the volatility that we've got for the last 3-4 years period, beginning with the first of the currency crisis we had back in late summer of 2018, despite all this, and relative volatility, of course, in FDI and several other, indicators, we've got still, somewhat an interest to the Turkish real sector, and this has got something to do at least with this one, I guess. So therefore, I just wanted to include this doing business index. So ease of doing business, in fact, from the World Bank is pretty much well known, I guess, and they're not reporting it right after 2022. I think they are now reformatting it into another dimension, and they'll be revealing the new index pretty soon, I hope. But nevertheless, what we can read out from this, Turkey has jumped, and literally jumped from 2018 ranking to its 2019 one. So it's doing quite good in terms of eliminating some of the burdens or bureaucracy and red tape and several other issues among the investors. This is the ranking, yes. Lower is better, yes. Lower is better. And smaller is better, I'm sorry. So, again, within the same time period, I was just focusing over this FDI thing, pretty much in between 2019 and 2021 up to, of course, the final data being revealed for the world economy. So this is the ranking in ease of doing business. Yes. Legal stuff. Permits. Many different kind of red tape issues, taxation. Yes. In many ways, ease of doing business in a given country. Shutdown procedures like opening up a new business. So all that kind of stuff. This is this, and the World Bank has stopped actually announcing this. Regulatory issues, yes, all included. So of course, it's not like 100% correlation, but somewhat it's got to do with this because again at this time we've got several of those economies that including now Turkey's peers as well as some of the advanced economies. This is a graph referring to the country's share from foreign direct investment. Again, in between 2019 and 2021. Turkey is not doing that bad in that regard. All right. So the world's whole FDI flow. Yes, it's this is from the UN UNCTAD's World Investment Report 2022. Might be all related to the COVID period because it's got 2020 and 2021 in it. I don't know. Might be a sharp because you may see out that effect of COVID-19 for Chinese economy as well, right? I mean, it's dropped significantly. Otherwise, China would come second, I guess. Yeah, I mean, despite all those constraints and other maybe bias from the COVID-19 effect, Turkey has been actually, and I may say that it's been more or less stable, quite similar to the case of Turkey's share from total world trade. The FDI also has been quite stable over the course of 20 years. All right. Yeah, two couple slides, and then I'll be finishing up my words, hopefully, with several headlines at the end. So with the second part of my emphasis over Turkey's efforts to revitalize the role of industry or industrial production, I think this has got to do something with the overall course of Turkey's industry or the manufacturing industry. This refers to the productivity increases for several economies, again within the same period, and the US has been the benchmark for this, and this is the percent to the US productivity rate. So obviously, we've got significantly good doing countries over here. We've got the Germans. We've got the Koreans, for instance. The Koreans have, they have demonstrated a significant increase over the course of the 20 years. The Japanese are going back. Mexico is a little bit stagnant. The Polish are doing great in that wise. The UK is a little bit stagnant over time, but Turkey is also doing great. So this is 68% of the productivity of the US. So how productive the US is, you got a measure for this, and 68% productive of the US is for Turkey. No, this is I think per labor hour. One final one, and this is the economic complexity index for Turkey only, and so I mean we've got two distinct actually references over here. So no matter which one you take, you basically see that, and these are two basic categorization of the actually number of goods and being produced by the manufacturing industry. Very well known and much referred categorization of those. That actually somewhat refers to the number and diversity of the products actually being produced domestically. So that I mean, from both angles, actually, Turkey has been doing good in terms of increasing its diversity and economic complexity over the course again of the last 2 decades. So and this is the ranking again. It's pretty much similar to the case of the doing business, and it's been on the rise. So what I may tell, based on those figures of the share of the industrial sector from the GDP or the manufacturing industry, again, the employment share of the manufacturing industry over, let's say from its share from exports, like it's more than 90% still today, the manufacturing industries. What Turkey has a little bit figured out, right, in the second decade of the AK Party period is that revitalizing industry would become somewhat important. Even though Turkey was trying hard to diversify its services exports, though. I mean, it's done quite a lot, at least to diversify some of its product in the financial industry. And also making Turkey a more attractive destination for tourism, etc. But it's still yet, or even the vast amount of investment took place in transportation. it was still actually the manufacturing industry, which was kind of having the upper hand. So that's why I think a new period of revitalization of industrial sector was in place, especially through right after this regime change back in 2018. And well, obviously this time it's not something that would take place, back in 1970s, especially true for much of the developing countries, that they were investing significant amounts in, some of the basic industries. But this time Turkey has done a lot. 1 minute, yes. Turkey has done a lot to invest, or, making it more attractive at the SMEs level. I mean, I usually refer this, and nowadays I think they've got more than 5% share among the total output of the SMEs, and these guys are startups. So startups and new, joint ventures, etc. So this type of, orientation this time, again focusing over the role of technology and innovation, is in its own way so far. But for a couple of words for the structural weaknesses, we've got still pretty much issues with regards to people's let's say habits towards understanding the economy and figuring out or just placing their investments, etc. So that kind of sentiment oriented work has to be carried out. I mean, that includes financial literacy, etc. So all those kind of components, I mean, to make up a more rational basis for economic choices, and even forming out better expectations. So that has become more visible for the last 3 years, as the inflationary and other macro indicators or several other indicators based outlook was going bad. You would see there was some kind of a reinforcing effect from that kind of sentiment. So this country has been long suffering from let's say dollarization, for instance. That kind of benchmarking has been quite wide and very much common in many sectors for any kind of economic agent. So that kind of sentiment to be placed in a more right way, in a more rational way, is a must. And of course, we've got a lot more to do with regards to the labor market. There are some certain rigidities still in place that keeps relatively the labor productivity low, and the unemployment also has become a major issue in that regard. And adaptation of several industries, foremost the SMEs, to the new world. What this one, of course, implies is pretty much about this so-called Green Deal and several other transformation that requires certain amount of investment, and it's certainly going to be a big cost, at least over the SMEs in the short run. So that kind of adaptation period would take, certain trainings and etc. in place, and also like an awareness altogether. So that kind of, I think, issues are ahead, and Turkey, meantime, would try to fulfill its, basics of its industrialization efforts, but meantime, opening up new doors to new developments, hopefully. I'm sorry for making it quite long.
Thank you very much, Dr. Babajan. This was a very heavy lecture regarding regarding Turkish economy. He started his talk by saying that Turkish economy has been expanding as Turkey has becoming a rising power, and that Turkey has adopted a state as a policy of using soft power also through financial aid. We never got to the foreign aid part, but yesterday we talked a bit about it. Perhaps in the Q&A, you can expand on that. And there is, of course, a new role for Turkey as it builds its strategic alliances, as well as becoming a player at the regional level in international governance. Turkey's effort also in the second stage after 2018 has been to revitalize the industrial sector and focus. There has been focus of increased role of SMEs and defense industries. He also talked a bit about the structural weaknesses related to the business cycles. He went over many graphs to indicate the changes that have been taking place for the past 2 decades when it comes to Turkish economy. Particularly, he had a graph on the per capita income, even though it was rising and reached $12,000 per capita in 2013. Now it's about $10,000 a decade later because of the some of the weaknesses and the impact of the inflation on the Turkish lira, the depreciation of the Turkish lira. He also had some graphs with comparisons with different countries, Germany, US, Korea, Japan, China, Brazil, India, and so on and so forth. And he has shown some numbers for Turkey to be respectable as far as the vis-a-vis the other countries. I haven't, maybe perhaps you can tell us, where does Turkey place in terms of economy worldwide, particularly because of the depreciation of the Turkish lira. He showed also that the export has reached about $83 billion in 2021, if I read that correctly, and that the share of the trade is about, if I understood that correctly, also about 10% of GDP, while the manufacturing sector is rising. He also talked about the penetration, meaning the rise of Turkey as an exporter, net, and it also went from about 12% in 2000 to about 26% in 2020. And he also showed some graphs about the exports, and of course, by large, the dominant partner is Western or the European Union rather. And he showed also figures about the foreign direct investment, which went from about 1 billion in 2000 to about 14 billion in 2021. And there has been also an accumulated, I think it was about 80 something, 87, I think, billion dollars of accumulated foreign investment. There could be some questions there. He also showed the ranking of Turkey to have reached about 33 from 93 earlier in the AK party, before the AK party. And the share of the foreign direct investment of Turkey, but this is a period that was tricky because the pandemic was part of it, was about 6% of world investment. He also ended his talk about giving us highlights about the structural weaknesses within Turkish economy, the habits, understanding of economy and the investment, the financial literacy, understanding the rationality of economic and business cycles and choices and expectations, particularly toward the macro indicators, and the suffering from the dollarization, the inflationary pressures, unemployment, and so on. Of course, perhaps during the Q&A, we can hear a little bit about the impact of debt, foreign debt, why and how. Our next presenter is Dr. Murad Yash. Please.
First of all, I would like to greet the organizing committee of CIGA, Sabahattin Zaim University, the audience here, and also in the Zoom. Assalamu alaikum. And secondly, I would like to thank CIGA and Sabahattin Zaim University to organize this important event. Let me share my slides. So just now, respected Professor Mehmet Babacan, he made a great summary of Turkish economy. But my topic is more specific in that sense. However, it can be an interesting topic for the audience in the sense that how politics can affect financial markets, especially Islamic finance is a very visible area that how government policies and policies of political parties can affect the development of this industry. So in this talk, I will talk about how politics affects the development of Islamic finance industry in Turkey. So I will start with the background information for those who don't have much understanding of Islamic finance. And then I will give my motivation of the study and research question. And I will share my data and methodology. And then I will show you the events that affected the development of Islamic finance industry in Turkey by sharing some market data as well. And then I will have some discussions regarding my research questions and findings. And then I will end up with a conclusion of this research. This is not a complete research, like it is kind of incomplete. So the analysis part is not very sophisticated. So if you have some constructive feedbacks regarding that part, I will appreciate. Okay. So as a background information, for those who are not familiar with Islamic finance, I will just share some principles and prohibitions in Islamic finance. So the principles are risk sharing, transparency, asset-backed financial products, property rights, free markets, social welfare side of Islam, zakat and sadaqah, considering the environmental and social impact of the investments. And the prohibitions are the interest, riba, corruption, high uncertainty, gambling, imperfect information, and social and environmentally harmful investments are the prohibitions. And just giving some ideas about Islamic financial markets. So we have Islamic banks, we have sukuk, which is the Islamic bond, we have Islamic funds, other Islamic financial institutions like microfinance, and we have takaful is kind of Islamic insurance. And the industry in the world is more than, it's almost around $4 trillion at the moment. It's growing very fast. And at the moment in the world, we have more than like 1,600 institutions, and it's operating in more than 90 countries in the world now. And Turkey is one of them. At the moment, we are ranked 15 in the world. Even if we were one of the earliest starter of this industry, it dates back 1980s, started same time with Malaysia, and Malaysia is #1 now, but Turkey is number 15. And the political factors also can be a reason for explaining why we are not in top 5 at the moment, because we started at the same time and we have similar economy and greater population. So this study will shed light on this issue. So as a motivation for this study, financial development is important. It drives the economic growth, it creates wealth, it assists the economic development. Many studies show that. And also in that sense, Islamic finance is important. It can also help for economic growth, creating wealth and assisting economic development as well. Previous studies usually focused on the Muslim population, income per capita, legal origins, trade openness, and culture to understand the development of Islamic finance in different countries. However, like almost no studies focus on political factors to explain the development of Islamic finance, which can be actually very critical to explain the development of industry in different countries. So why Turkey? Islamic finance date back 1980s. It has a long history, and at the moment, as I explained, it's number 15. It is not in top 5. And we have dual financial systems that we both have conventional financial institutions and Islamic financial institutions. They operate next to each other. We are Muslim majority countries, but with people different opinions about Sharia law and secularism, right? So when it comes to Islamic finance, people can have different opinions. And that is something also unique about Turkey. Also, different political parties have different interpretations of secularism, and they have different ideologies regulating relations between state and Islam. So that's, in that sense, Turkey provides a unique case. And my research question, how political factors and government policies can explain different stage of Islamic finance development in Turkey. Okay. So the data I'm using is the time period between 1983 and 2021. And the country is Turkey, of course. So normally the banking data is not publicly available before 2000. So I need to collect those data from newspapers, especially for participation banks. So I need to find their market share and the size of the total assets from newspapers back in those years. So it was difficult to collect those data. But anyway, I achieved. And the variables I'm using here, it's not very sophisticated analysis, just some statistical analysis. I'm using regulations on Islamic finance that the government has important role, and government's direct involvement in Islamic finance industry, how much government has been involved in this industry directly, and Islamic finance education, and how those factors affect the development of the Islamic banking assets, sukuk assets, Islamic funds, the number of institutions, and their total assets. So methodology, so I categorized different periods of governments and political parties in Turkey as a supportive, neutral, and unsupportive for Islamic finance industry based on government policies and regulations for the industry. And I present a simple statistical analysis observing how different approaches of governments and political parties on Islamic finance affected the growth of Islamic financial assets. And I will show these different approaches of different governments with different colors. If it is supportive, it's greener color. If it is unsupportive, it is becoming red color. All right, so now I will show you some data and results here. But yeah, I'm also summarizing history of Turkey briefly, especially to understand the relation between state and Islam. So back in 1924, in the constitution, Islam was the official state of Turkey, right? It was an official state of the religion. And the emphasis on laicism was just one time in the constitution, but after coups constitutions, 1961, Islam is removed from constitution as official religion, and emphasis on the laicism increased a lot. Like it has been 8 times in 861 constitution, in 82 constitution, it was 10 times. And there was a constant intervention of the army in democracy and politics in those years, especially until 1980s. And especially, we see we have here the photo of the President Anna Menderes, that there was a re-entrance of Islam into public sphere more, and it ended up with its capital punishment, unfortunately, right? So, and Turkey attempted to create its secular bourgeoisie as well in those years. So it was a difficult time in those years to regulate relation between state and Islam. And then in the Özal period, especially, those years were the time that Islamic finance industry started to operate. And Turgut Özal implemented first policies for Turkey's neoliberal economic transformation and promoted freedom and freedom of religion in 1980s and early 1990s. And when he started operations, he made the regulations after approval of cabinet decree on special finance house in 1983. He told his advisor that please manage this issue, special finance houses. That time they called Islamic financial institutions as special finance house. He told, please manage this issue very carefully and don't make any mistake. Eyes of all will be on this issue and they will wait for us to fail. So he had such pressure when he allowed the establishment of Islamic financial institutions. And here the green colors for the time that was like a supportive, but not very supportive. It's like a light green color for the Islamic finance industry. And government had many regulations for the industry, especially for establishing Islamic banks. The Cabinet decree in 1983 allowed establishment of special finance houses. And after those years, within 10 years, three foreign-owned Islamic banks has been established as a special finance house. Bahrain-based Al Baraka Türk in 1984, Saudi-based Faisal Finance in 1985, and Kuwait-based Kuwait Türk in 1989. And especially it is also related to neoliberal policies of the Turgut Özal. And then first Turkey-based, Turkish-owned Anadolu Finance has been established in 1991. So there had been a very fast development in Islamic finance industry, but also government has been involved, especially in Islamic capital markets. There had been a legislation for revenue sharing certificates. So we can say maybe even this is like one of the first sukuk, maybe sovereign sukuk in the world, right? So at that time they call it revenue sharing certificate. It has been used for big projects, and especially for the Bosphorus Bridge and the Keban and Oymapinar Dam. So government use real Islamic financial products. Like even today's sovereign sukuk is Turkey is not backed by any like a proper financial transactions or project. But in those 1980s, like there was authentic practices of Islamic finance, especially as capital market products by government. But after 1993, of course, but before I come that, I show some graphs as well. So in here, you can see the market share of the Islamic banks reach 3% within 1 decade. So it is supporting the idea that like when there is a proper regulations and government support from the industry, there can be a stable growth for the industry. So after 1993, Turgut Özal passed away, or we recently figured out he has been poisoned, unfortunately. So we had years of uncertainties and coalition governments. Çiller and Yılmaz government, they had neutral stance for Islamic finance industry. The Erbakan period, he was a very strong supporter of Islamic finance as political idea. And after 1997, of course, his emphasis on Islam ended up with the postmodern coup due to increasing concern for laicism in Turkey. And then he had to resign in 1998. And if I summarize time periods as the government's support for Islamic finance industry, so those neutral years between 1993 and 1995, I show in yellow color, and Ihlas Finance has been established. And then in the green colors, that President Erbakan was the leader, and the Asya Finance had been established. And the end of that year, 1997, we had a postmodern coup due to laicism concern, and then we had more strict regulations for the special finance houses. Prince Faisal was summoned to the court due to allegations about Faisal Finance to put pressure against foreign direct investment regarding Islamic finance industry. And then we had abolition of special finance house decree. And in those years, there were great concerns whether it will be end of Islamic finance industry or not, because when they follow the conventional financial laws, legally it meant that it will be end of Islamic finance in Turkey, but somehow at the end, with the support of ex-President Yılmaz and I think Çiller, they didn't do that. But there had been so many negative news regarding special finance houses those years, and Ihlas Finance also bankrupted. And also Faisal Finance sold his assets to Ülker Group in 2001. So If you also see the market share, it is very correlated with these political events. Like in the neutral years, the growth was stable, but not very fast. But especially in those years of President Erbakan, the industry grew very fast. Like the market share doubled within 2 years. And then after 1998, after the postmodern coup, the market share within 3 years became 1% of the total market. So you can see how those political events affected the market share of the Islamic banks in Turkey. So then we had the President Erdoğan's period after 2002. We had the neoliberal economic policies, improvements in macroeconomic stability and decreasing political uncertainties, and disappearance of political pressure against Islamic finance industry. Still, within these 10 years, there had been so many development, but of course, still government didn't involve too much to Islamic finance industry. They started to reuse these Bosphorus Bridge revenue sharing certificates, and then considering establishment of Islamic banks in 2003. So the idea was there in 2003, but it took place like after 10 years of that. So yeah, even more. So you can see like how it was difficult to take action to make those decisions. And then participation banks had been redefined under the Banking Act in 2005. And then some of the participation banks merged. And then we had first Islamic index, but blue colors are the ones who are done by the industry, private entrepreneurs, right? It's not done by government. So still you see so many efforts of the private financial institutions, private Islamic financial institutions, like first sukuk issued by Kuwait Turk, not by government. And also 2007, we had the e-memorandum by army due to the licensing concern, right? So also it can kind of explain why establishing these Islamic banks by government took so long years, because there was still some pressure by army against those policies, right? Yeah. So, but still many taxes removed regarding the Islamic capital markets. Legislation for sukuk has been done 2010, and establishment of first takaful company is 2009. So there had been so many development in those years, and the industry again had a rapid growth after 2002. It was like a 1.8%, and then it reached to 4.6% within these 9 years. There had been a stable growth. And after 2011, there had been so many issues in Turkey, like with terror attacks, and then Gezi Park protests, and then conflicts in Middle East, refugee crisis, clash with FETÖ, failed coup attempt, and then it ended up like a presidential system, and COVID, it's like a global issue. So then after presidential system, we had a greater expansion of presidential power, right? So it allowed greater support for Islamic finance industry. And in here, there is a quote from President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. He says, 2021, I will remove the burden of interest on my people. I cannot walk together with anyone who support interest. There is a clear order, prohibition of interest in Islam here. So he publicly announced his support for Islamic finance, and also he increased this involvement of government in Islamic finance industry, especially after 2017-15 with presidential system, and also a few years before that. So you see there had been so many developments within last decade. So first sovereign sukuk, so especially government involvement increased after 2012 with the first sovereign sukuk, and more regulations for sukuk. And so many state-owned Islamic banks started operations. And after 2004, it has been a part of a development plan, supporting Islamic finance, part of a development plan, strategic development plan of Turkey, and many Islamic banks had been established 2015, Ziraat participation, 2016, Vakıf participation, 2019 emlak participation owned by government, state-owned Islamic banks has been established. And then within the clash with the, of course, with the FETÖ, Gülenist owned Bank Asya bankrupted. It was biggest bank, Islamic bank in those years, and also affected the growth of the industry within these 3-4 years. Sukuk is Islamic bond. So 9 takaful companies has been established within like 4 or 5 years. We had Islamic insurance windows. And there had been new regulations also for takaful recently, and now they can operate as window. They have to be a full-fledged Islamic insurance company. Now also they attract so many foreign direct investment for this industry. We had after 2019 and 20, we also started to have Sharia governance. That is also a milestone for Islamic finance industry, because these Sharia issues are always like under the carpet in Turkey, because of laicism concern. They cannot even say Sharia, right? They say advisory board, and they cannot use Islam or Sharia words. Still, there is a concern regarding laicism. They cannot establish this institution under regulatory bodies as well. So they had to establish within Participation Bank Association of Türkiye. So there are still steps need to be taken regarding those issues. And if I share the figures now, there are so many different figures because market developed very fast regarding sukuk, banks, funds, etc. So the banking industry, as I mentioned, with the bankruptcy of the Gülenist Bank Asya after 2013, the Islamic financial assets fell down, but with the establishment of the 3 state-owned Islamic banks after 2016, the market share increased very fast, and now it's around 8% of the total banking industry. And sukuk market, like there was almost nothing before 2012, and now it is like how much money? That's like a 74 billion Turkish lira. It is very important part of also sovereign sukuks. The government issue sovereign sukuks a lot. Like half of the sukuk market is sovereign sukuk at the moment. Islamic funds, like it was almost nothing before 2017, and now it reached above 6%. And insurance premiums regarding takaful companies, it is again like before 2014, it was less than 1%, but now it is more than 5%. So you can see a very fast development of Islamic financial assets within the last 10 years. And also number of institutions offering Islamic finance degrees, like even Sabahattin Zaim University is having Islamic finance program here. Sabahattin Zaim, especially we know him with his important role in Islamic finance industry in Turkey and also in Islamic Development Bank. So number of programs increased, like we have more than 10 programs in Turkey now, and most of them are offered in the public universities. And also, if you see the government-owned Islamic financial assets, like this is the especially Islamic banks, what is the share of state-owned Islamic banks' total assets compared to total Islamic banks? Now, these 3 state-owned Islamic banks has almost like a 40% of the total Islamic banking assets. So they have very important role in the growth of Islamic finance industry. So these are 2 figures regarding.
Green ones are the public ones?
Yeah, public ones are the public Islamic banks. If you remove them, industry growing much slower than today's growth. Turkish. This is Turkey's Islamic banking industry. And also left side is Turkey's universities. So most Islamic now Istanbul University has, Sakarya University has, Marmara University has, and Konya, few universities in Konya have assessor. I'm sorry. Green ones, Ziraat, Vakıf, and Emlak Katılım. the green ones, Ziraat, Emlak, and Vakıf Participation Bank. So they are growing very fast. If you just look at the green ones, like the government Islamic banking assets, like tripled within 3 years, 4 years, triple or 4 times greater within these 3-4 years. Discussions. So these discussions are in the literature, part of literature. So there are, all right, I will, okay, I will try to summarize. So there are different kinds of relation between state and Islam. We have in the literature laicite approach, laicism. This is kind of French secularism, right? Strong secularism, and it is recognizing the practicing religion in personal and private life, but it doesn't much giving space for them in public sphere, right? And Turkey especially embraced this approach, tried to embrace this approach for long decades. And then second approach is Islam and state neutral relation. This is weak secularism, that the government doesn't have an official religion, but also do not much involve in the religious affairs. Like the religious organizations and institutions can have place in public sphere, and government doesn't intervene much. And third one is pluralist accommodation. So in here, government recognizes different religions. Like the state can have, this country, for example, can have like Christian minority, Muslim majority, or even like different sects like Alevi, Sunni, Shia, etc., and other even minority religions, and give them space in public sphere, even give them funding. And fourth one, recognition without establishing. Government sometimes can recognize certain religion or certain, like it's also not just for Islam, but also for Christianity. In Europe, you see some countries embrace certain church, evangelic church, etc. You see in Scandinavian countries, it's very normal, in Europe as well. So also some Muslim countries, they accept Islam as official state religion. However, they don't establish or support Islamic institutions directly. And we have religious establishment. That means like countries accept the religion as official religion, a certain religion. In here it's Islam, and they can publicly support these religious institutions. Okay. So in here, Turkey embraced different approaches or approaches between certain levels, so in different time periods. And during unsupportive approach, governments put pressure on the industry. They avoid interacting with the Islamic financial institutions. They don't put them their assets, or they don't take loans from them. They don't use Islamic financial transactions, and as regulations, they put strict regulations for the industry. They don't make laws for the Islamic financial institutions, and they have tendency to give penalties for Islamic financial institutions. They try to find their mistakes. And education and awareness, they publishing negative news about the industry in the newspapers. They don't offer any education regarding that area. And they don't recognize even foreign universities providing degrees in Islamic finance. All right. So when I went Malaysia 2012, INSAFE was one of the best university in the world, but still it was not recognized by government that time. So I was going without any hope. So those years, even 2012 was like that. Neutral approach. So we have a religious investor and Islamic financial institutions demand regulations and supportive infrastructure from government. And government have neutral approach for that. So if there is a demand, government gives some infrastructure from the industry. And often they use Islamic windows, state-owned conventional banks instead of full-fledged Islamic banks. Government-owned corporation use both Islamic and conventional. And there is tax neutrality. They don't charge extra or give incentive for industry. They have neutral position for the industry. And as education, mostly private universities are involved in offering programs. And supportive approach. So in here, Islamic finance industry becomes a part of government strategic plan for development, all right? And government directly involved in establishing Islamic financial institutions, and they have transactions with those institutions, or they are using Islamic financial products in their activities. And in terms of regulations, they provide special incentives for Islamic financial institutions, for tax incentives, for incentives for salaries of the wages of employees or for their education, etc. And they grant licenses easily for establishing Islamic financial institutions. And they improve regulatory framework for the institutions. And in terms of education and awareness, they promote education of Islamic finance in government universities. They provide scholarship for their students. They publish good news, positive news about industry. They sponsor seminars, conferences regarding Islamic finance. And even during Friday ceremonies, they can give ceremony about Islamic finance to promote industry. So as conclusion, Islam, this is the fate of many Muslim countries. It has been often politicized. And it's hard to have neutral approach for Islamic finance because of that. Some parties are against it, some parties are supporting it, and very rare to find a parties having neutral approach for Islamic finance. And political parties stands for Islam can support and prevent development of Islamic finance industry. And Islamic financial institutions has important role here to improve financial inclusion of religious community, especially for the financial and economic development of the countries. So high support for Islamic financial institutions can empower religious and Muslim communities, while putting barriers for Islamic financial institutions can weaken them. So in here, that's why these policies might significantly affect people's support for certain political parties as well. So these are my conclusions. If you have any comments and also feedbacks, you can also send me email. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yash, for your presentation. He spoke about the politics and the development of Islamic finance, very rich presentation. And he talked about how politics impact finance and economy within a particular society. He started by pointing out or sharing the principles and provisions in Islamic finance and the development of Islamic institutions. He said there are about 1,600 institutions over 47 countries, where Turkey ranks 15th in the world, while Malaysia ranks first. He talked about the financial development that drives economic growth and creates wealth and assists in the overall economic development. He said Turkey has dual financial systems, one Islamic, one commercial, while Islamic financial institutions went through several stages, starting from 1983. He surveyed that development between 1983 and 2021, and he gave the different variables that impact such growth, whether it's in the regulations of Islamic financial institutions, or the involvement of the government, or awareness, or the growth of the Islamic banking stock, etc. He said also that the government may have different approaches to these institutions. They could be supportive or having a neutral and stand in the terms of weak secularist governments, as well as being unsupportive. And then he went through the history, starting from the laïcism, talked about how it impacted the constitutions of 2461 and 1982. Turkey has to go through different coups, which had to do also with the involvement of the army to support secularism. He talked about then the era of Turkic Özal between 83 and 92. That's when the development of Islamic financial institutions started to grow, and he went through that history and showed that there were few institutions supported by Bahrain or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or even Turkey, such as Al-Baraka and Kuvayt Turk, that survived these years. He also talked about the years of uncertainties, as well as the neutral years, as well as the supportive years during Erbakan of 95 through 97. Then he talked about the AK Party era, or the one between two different eras, between 2002 and 2011, where there wasn't much growth. And then after that, there was many events that impacted it. And he talked also about the army memorandum of 2007. However, he said that the development of Islamic finance went pretty quickly from about 18% in 2002, from 1.8% of 2002 to about 4.6% in 2011 to about 8% now. He talked about the different figures. There are the sukuk with about 75 billion Turkish liras. The assets of the financial institution about 8% of the banking industry, insurance about 5%, and Islamic funds about 6%. There are even 10 programs of academic institutions that teach Islamic financing in different universities, including public universities, and that even there are public banks which have about 4% of the Islamic banking assets. And then he moved into the discussion. He talked about 5 things: the different state-Islam relationships between laicity, the strong secularism or Islamic state neutrality, the weak secularism, or pluralist accommodations or recognition without establishment, or religious establishment, which is the highest order. Then he talked about different approaches from government depending on their political stand on the issue of Islamic financing. Could be top-down approach or neutral approach, which is a bottom-up approach that involves government involvement with regulations, or a supportive approach, which is also a top-down. And he gave some conclusions that politics plays a great role in the development of Islamic financial institutions, and that the political parties can support or prevent the development of such institutions. Thank you very much for both of our speakers. We still have a third speaker, but before that, we're going to give the opportunity to Dr. Munzer Kahf because he has to teach a course. Dr. Munzer, you have 10 to 12 minutes, please. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
From my side? No, I am unmuted on my side. So
we can hear you. We hear you. We hear you now.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we do.
طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I would like first to start thanking CIGA and Dr. Sami also for this interesting, very important series of discussion, the situation in the different Muslim countries politically and economically. And this is really a very good effort from Dr. Sami and also from CIGA itself. It's very important, very useful, and very challenging. To come directly now to the issue of these 2 papers, I listened to them. They are very, very interesting papers. And of course, I have few points on each one of them. But let me start with the paper of Dr. Babajan. And he made very good presentation of the development of the Turkish economy during these 2 decades. Yet, it looks to me as if it is a paper that is presented for AK Party to use it as introduction to its political election campaign. It's like a campaign paper. It doesn't talk about the shortcoming, for instance. It doesn't talk about the problems, what efforts are done to really deal with this problem. So it's a paper that is closer to be kind of, looks to me, one-sided in a sense. For instance, he did not talk to us about the foreign ingredient into the local economy and the effect of this foreign ingredient on the growth of the local economy, whether in industry or in agriculture especially. They did not also talk about the inflation and its bad effect really on real income and real personal income, how it was during this period. We needed a few slides on that, which he stayed silent on it. And although he made a few points at the end, but they are very shying points without really touching on the issues. While we have an increase in per capita income, it's more important the distribution of this per capita income. And that will give us whether there is really any improvement on poverty, on the less unfortunate segment of the economy or of the society. Again, we needed some talk about, for instance, the unemployment of youth, how it developed throughout these 2 decades, and also on women economic contribution, and whether there is or there is no discriminations in wages and salaries in reality as a de facto. Let the policy or the desire of the party and the desire of all normal people also in this regard. So women equality in gender, equality in wages, in factories, in opportunities of employment, potentialities of employment. All this, Dr. Babajan didn't want to touch or wanted to avoid. So we talk about the achievements, in other words, only of the AK party during these 2 decades. It was definitely a great achievement, but that achievement came also with some pain that we should really understand it. What effort was done to reduce dependence on imported food, especially grain? What effort is done toward food security? Schemes on financing the SMEs. SMEs definitely need more support, require more support. And what schemes do we have, and what we did during this period of schemes to really finance the SMEs? Efforts on reducing bureaucracy. Turkey is a country that inherited 500 years of bureaucracy and of laws and regulations here and there and everywhere, which is right. That happens in all countries like Turkey, because of that huge inheritance of regulations and laws and etc. UK has several problems, and Egypt has also several similar problems. Sorry. But what effort has been done to reduce it? The index of corruption was improved during the AK party, but there are also indications that again it went back to rise again. So what are the strategies to fight corruption? So all these, we need really to hear about them, so we got a balanced presentation and see where we are exactly now. I wish in his second review of the paper, he would touch on these issues. All of them, 6, 7 issues, to me are very important also, along with the achievement, which is very admirable, but again, achievement come very often with certain pain. Dr. Murad paper is also an excellent one in presenting the history of the political effect on in Turkey. Of course, political effect is expected to be very huge on any kind of institutional ideas that relate to the economy. But after all, the macro economy is always run by the political will. And when you have political will, you have new ideas in the economy and finance. But when you don't have political will, of course, you have a problem. Saudi Arabia, for instance, prevented all Islamic banking politically only until 1987. And in 87 was the first Islamic bank that was allowed, and it was not allowed to carry any name, like what happened in Turkey. Here's Special Finance House, it was allowed to be called شركة الراجحي المصرفية للاستثمار. الراجحي company, banking company, الراجحي banking company for investment. There is no name of bank at all. Then later, because of the change of the political will, it was changed into a Rajhi Bank, which is now called a Rajhi Bank. So the similar thing, the license for the first Islamic bank in Nigeria stayed in the quarters of the central bank and the Ministry of Finance for 12 years. And after 12 years, because of the political change, there was the license was issued. And then the first Islamic bank in Nigeria started in 2012. So, and 12 years ago was the application and also the funds deposited with the central bank that created in Nigeria the first problem that the Islamic bank, the first Islamic bank, must face, that all these funds that were deposited with the central bank accumulated a huge amount of interest. And you as an Islamic bank, what do you do with this interest? So that was really the first problem faced. So the political will, of course, it affects, but we probably have to have some international comparison. It's not enough to see it within one country, especially a country that has much higher degree of political freedom compared with most all or probably all other countries, other Muslim majority countries in the world. Probably even a comparison with what happened in UK, how the Islamic banks were licensed in UK, under what kind of political will. I would like to argue in another point here, the way we present and the way we perceive Islamic finance has a lot of effect on this idea of the political reaction to it. Well, what is Islamic finance? It's finance as usual. As a matter of fact, it's not something that is really different. It is finance. Don't all people know the sale contract and lease contract and sharing contract? That is Islamic finance. It existed in the Turkish law since day one, these kind of contract. The only thing Islamic finance does is to take these contracts and make them part of the financial institution. So this here, the result of it, in fact, we presented it, and that was clear in Turkey. We presented it as something that relates to your faith. And we talk about faith and religion and Islam should rule or should not rule or whatever. And then you have the dispute of all these parties. Of course, they are talking about Islam, not about Islamic finance. But Islamic finance is not only also for Muslim, even it is for secularists, it's better. Because it's a kind of finance that relates directly on what I call one-to-one relationship with the real market. So it is in fact finance for the real market, let alone being Islamic or not. Is it not better for you as a secularist and as whoever you be, could be a Christian or Jews or Hindu or Buddhist, it is better for you on that basis because it reduces the separation between the finance sector and the real economy sector. It brings them close together. Rather, it even integrates Islamic finance or integrates the finance sector into the real sector instead of being aloof from it and having that dichotomy. So probably with this, the way we presented it in a way that makes it part of that polarization. In UK, for instance, it was adopted and regulations were amended in order to level the ground for both Islamic and interest-based finance and let them compete together. And the Islamic finance is growing in UK on that basis. All we need is leveling the ground. We don't really need anything beyond that. And we will show that it is in reality more related to the real economy and therefore more related to development, to growth, and to better distribution of income in the economy. So all these, we did not do that because we presented it as, oh, it has to be based on faith. It's a faith, it's Islam or not. That's not that's a different issue. And of course, I am Muslim and I believe in Islam, but it's a different issue when it comes to Islamic finance, how we present it to people. It is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent rahmatan lil alameen, not alone rahmatan to Muslims. It is rahmatan to everybody. And part of this rahmah is we have a system of finance that is better than the interest-based finance. The last thing I want to emphasize, which is very important, but I did not see it in the paper of Dr. Murad, that really Islamic finance is not an issue of replacing interest with sale, lease, and sharing. It goes beyond that because we need also to remove transactions that are fake, that do not make any reality, that do not relate to the real economy. Like, for instance, all transactions, unfortunately, we have them in Turkey here. So when President Erdoğan talks about interest is prohibited, equally prohibited, as a matter of fact, is to trade something that is fake, that doesn't really exist, like the contracts for differences, or like the options that we have them in the stock market here in Turkey. So we need to remove these also. We need to remove these fake transactions, these transactions that do not generate any added real value. So it's not enough then to talk about interest and replacing interest. Well, interest is haram. Yes, it is haram in our religion, but also it is haram to deal with fake things, with things that do not have real existence in the market. So all these go together. We cannot create Islamic finance on one leg alone. It has to go on all the legs together and in all areas together. It's good that the paper referred, and we have here in Turkey also Islamic insurance that has become available, but that's again not enough. We need to reform the stock market. We need to reform the way what is listed in the stock market and what is not listed. All these are part of Islamic finance, and we need to talk about them in the same way as we talk about interest. And I rather, the final thing, Islamic finance is not eliminating interest, because that alone is a negative action. Islamic finance is about presenting finance based on sale and lease and sharing. So we present finance. It's not that we don't present finance. We present finance, but on different bases, which is better, which ends in actual relating the finance to the real market. Thank you. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I don't hear now. I don't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, now.
Yes, I want to thank you for your comments and for adding also to the discussion many points. They will respond to it later. Now we have our third presenter, Dr. Mehmet Fatih Aysan.
If you allow me, I will stay with you for only 20 minutes.
No problem.
Then excuse myself.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, before I start, thank you very much for organizing this wonderful event, the Dr. Sami Aryan and organizing committee. It's my pleasure to be here. Today, I am going to talk about social protection and particularly social policies in Turkey in the last 2 decades in AK Party area. In this presentation, I have 3 main parts. First of all, I will talk about social policies, what are they in general, and what kind of social policies we have in Turkey. And then I will particularly focus on 6 basic pillars of social policy areas, namely education, social security, health, social services, and social protection and housing. And lastly, I will offer a brief discussion of some of the challenges we are facing today. And I will try to understand the sustainability of social policies in Turkey. And if I have time, I will offer some suggestions or policy recommendations. Actually, this presentation, the date of this presentation is based on my previous research done in 2016, Understanding the Welfare Regime of Turkey, Institutions and Individuals. It was a nationwide study. I collected my quantitative data in Turkey from over 1,000 people. I also did some interviews with citizens, experts, policymakers for this study. I will also use some policy reports, publicly available data sets for Turkey. Policy can be defined as a reference to the government's actions towards certain outcomes. Social policies are meaningful to the extent that they can bring about a positive change in the society. According to T.H. Marshall, he defines social policy with reference to the policies that the state implements by providing services or income to increase the welfare of citizens. Having these views in mind, social policy can be defined as the systematic policies developed by the state to protect individuals against social risks and increase social welfare. At the beginning of the 21st century, our world is facing many challenges, including social, political, economic risks, and recently wars and global warming. These threats, which occur in different ways in different societies, bring great risks for welfare states with a stable social structure, a regular political system, and strong economies. During this period, while the promise of nation states to distribute social welfare is questioned, on the other hand, individuals become more dependent on social policies of the state as a result of these recent challenges. Analyzing these macro-scale changes that many countries facing and producing long-term answers are very important for the continuation of welfare regimes and the sustainability of the social policies in the 21st century. When social policies in Turkey examined in the last 2 decades, there are 2 dominant trends we are facing. First, it is possible to talk about a path dependency in social policy regulations of the contemporary period. Populism and family-centered social policy perspective constitute the foundation of the discontinuity. And this populism and family-centered social policies are not peculiar to contemporary Turkish state or government. Hence, due to these path dependency, there has been confusion about the types of reforms and logic of social provisions preventing the institutionalization of social policies in Turkey. Secondly, there has been a remarkable increase in public social spending since the 2000s, which cannot simply be explained by populism of AK Party or by the progression of the Turkish welfare regime to a social democratic one. The main cause of this rapid increase of public social spending or expenditure include Turkey's status as a latecomer welfare state, its increasing level of economic prosperity, and structural factors such as aging population and new social risks, leading to the rapid increase of public social spending in the last 2 decades. Therefore, recent developments in social policies and social spending in Turkey must be explained not only through global developments, but also through the country's own endogenous characteristics. In welfare regime classifications, some comparative studies analyze Turkey under the Southern European or Mediterranean welfare regime, while others consider it as a part of Middle Eastern group or Muslim welfare states. Whether it is considered as the member of one of these groups or not, the Turkish welfare regime has undergone significant transformations since 2000s. It seems to me there are 4 main pillars determining the distribution of welfare in Turkey, namely the state, the family, the market, and local actors such as non-profit organizations, associations, and foundations. This figure shows the role of these 4 welfare actors in Turkey. Family and the state are the most important welfare actors in Turkey, as you can see, while market and local actors are less significant players in welfare distribution. When asked their view on the role of these actors should play in future, 92% of respondents said that the state should play a more active role in welfare distribution. 91% said the same of the family, while 63 and 62% said the same for market and local actors, NGOs, respectively. Market businesses, yes, private businesses in general. This table shows public social expenditure of GDP in the OECD region and Turkey between 1980 and 2013. Turkey devoted only 4% of GDP to public social expenditure in 1980s, in contrast to OECD average of about 15%. Old age and survivor spending, which covers pensions and other types of cash and in-kind benefits, was one of the biggest spending area among these expenditures. OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. There are 32. Most of the members are European countries, plus North American countries, Turkey, South Korea, Mexico, but mostly developed and, yes, industrialized countries, we can say. Yes, the weight of these expenditure area increased, particularly in Turkey, from about 2% in 1990 to 8% in 2013. Another important expanding policy area is health services. In 2013, about 4% of GDP in Turkey and 6% of GDP in OECD was spent on public health services. Therefore, contrary to some researchers who argue that there has been a retrenchment of the welfare state, the social expenditures of the welfare state have not decreased in the last 2 decades. In the Turkish case, public social expenditures increased from about 4% to about 14%, which is the highest increase in OECD region in this period. So after giving this general information about Turkey and OECD countries, let me continue with the details of these social expenditures in Turkey. And let's start with education. According to statistics from the Turkish Ministry of Education, the formal education system has improved significantly in the last 2 decades. The percentage of primary school age children enrolled in school increased from 91% in 2002 to 95% in 2015. The number of students going on to higher education increased from 15% to 41% during that period. As you all know, during this period, there were some important new laws and reforms happened in Turkey. Compulsory education was expanded to 12 years as of the 2012 and 13 school year. The number of teachers increased significantly and the infrastructure of schools was improved. For example, the student-teacher ratio in primary education improved from 28 in 2002 to 18 in 2016. Similarly, the student-teacher ratio in secondary education improved from 16 to 13 during this period. The number of students per class was also lowered through the establishment of new schools. Even though the total number of secondary school students increased from 2.4 million to 5 million, about 5.2 million between 2002 and 2017, the number of students per class declined from 30 to 20 during the same period. During the 1990s and 2000s, the market or private institutions, private schools started to play a more active role in welfare distribution in education in Turkey. The number of students in private schools increased nearly eightfold over the period between 2002 and 2017. In private school. In private schools, in secondary schools, yes. Yes, it increased eight times. There is also increase in public education, but if you compare public education with private education, it eightfold. It was very significant increase. The rapid increase in the level of education in Turkey in recent years has also been reflected in the net enrollment rate in formal education. As can be seen in the figure, the net enrollment rate of primary school age children enrolled in the school increased from 85% in 1997 to 99% in 2011. And then with a slight decrease realized as 93% in 2018. So one of the most important reasons for this increase is the compulsory education reforms made in 1997 and 2012. The greatest increase in this process is seen at the secondary education level, which represents high school today. While the net enrollment rate of secondary school or high school was 38% in 1997, it increased to about 84% in 2018. As in primary and secondary education, the number of students attending higher education increased rapidly in this period. While the schooling rate in higher education or university was 10% in 1997, it increased to 44% in 2018. Despite efforts to address the fragmented structure of social security system in 2006, the system maintains a threefold structure with social security institution, SSK in Turkish, for blue-collar workers, emekli sandığı for white-collar employees working in public institutions, and Bağkur for merchants, agricultural workers, and other self-employed people. When we look at the Turkish population covered by social security institution has increased continuously since they are established in the mid 20th century. According to official data, while approximately 16 million people were within the scope of social security institution in 1970s, this number exceeded 70 million in 2018. As can be seen in the figure, the rate of the insured population in Turkey increased from 40% in 1970s to 83% in 2000 and about 86% in 2018. So the Turkish state plays a more active role in welfare of older people than any other age groups. In spite of Turkey's relatively young population, the share of public pension spending in total government expenditure is relatively higher in Turkey compared to more aged populations like Canada or Denmark. Let's have a look at the public pension expenditures in Turkey. Retirement income in Turkey is provided by the state, mostly by the state, for those who have paid old age pension premiums. As can be seen in the figure, while the percentage of public pension expenditure to GDP was only about 2% in 2000, which was the lowest of the selected OECD countries, it increased to 7.4% in 2015, making it one of the countries with the highest increase among OECD countries. Despite Turkey's relatively young population, the ratio of public pension expenditures to GDP is higher in Turkey compared to older populations like Canada or Norway, as you can see, or Germany. The reason why the share of public pension expenditures in total government expenditures in Turkey is higher than the other countries is that it was mainly because of the populism in Turkey. Let's have a look at health services in Turkey. Again, healthcare is another significant service that influences the well-being of the citizens. It became especially important after COVID-19. The AK Party government first introduced a 10-year health system reform called the Health Transformation Program. The reform aimed to develop a public universal healthcare system for all citizens. In addition to these attempts, various reforms during the 2000s increased the number of health and social services provided by the market or private hospitals, we can say. These new reforms led to a rapid expansion of health insurance coverage and access to healthcare services for all citizens, especially for the poor in Turkey. In addition to dependence of insured people, the poor and children under age 18 are entitled to benefit from the same healthcare services without paying social security premiums. When dependents and people who have general healthcare insurance are included, the healthcare system covered about 98% of the total population in 2015. So we can say we have a universal healthcare system in Turkey for all different groups. In the last 20 years, the number of health institutions has increased from 11,000 to approximately 35,000. When we look at the finance of the healthcare services, it can be said that while the primary health burden on households decreased between 2000 and 2018, the public health burden increased significantly. The total healthcare expenditure in public and private sectors was 8 billion lira in 2000, about 63% of which was covered by the general budget and 28% by the households. On the other hand, in 2018, this expenditure item exceeded 165 billion lira, of which 77% was covered by the state and 17% by households. These data show that the state allocates a significant budget to health in Turkey. Considering the health needs of the aging population, this rate is likely to increase in near future. Under these conditions, as stated above, basic health services, which are already covered by the general budget, will be fully covered by the state through taxes, and the abolition of health insurance premiums will be a good practice in terms of ensuring the transition to the universal healthcare system. Social services are another important cornerstone of social policies. When we look at the Turkish social services, residential care and rehabilitation centers to serve disabled people in Turkey, they are very important. While the number of official residential care and rehabilitation centers was 21 in 2002, it reached to 104 at the end of 2019. Due to aging of population, there has been an increase in the number of nursing homes and the elderly living there over the years. The number of official nursing homes in Turkey increased from 63 to 153 between 2002 and 2019. While the number of elderly people cared for in nursing homes was just under 5,000 in 2002, this number increased to around 14,000 in 2019. Therefore, the number of nursing homes affiliated to the Ministry of Family and Social Services has increased approximately about 2.5 times, and the number of elderly people cared by approximately 3 times compared to 2002. In addition, the transition to a more spatial type of household care from dormitories to childcare home is also important development for childcare services. While the number of children staying in children's homes and low houses, sevgi evleri, was around 5,000 in 2011, it more than doubled in 2019 and exceeded 12,000. So in the past, generally, needy children were cared in dormitories, but now most of them are cared in sevgi evleri again and children houses. Let's have a look at housing. Housing is also important part of social policies in Turkey. When we talk about housing projects or housing policies, we must remember TOKİ. TOKİ was established. What's TOKİ? Housing Development Administration of Turkey, as you all know. It was established in 1984, and with the new regulations during the AK Party period, TOKİ's power was expanded. Today, TOKİ operates in different areas such as social housing, urban transformation, disaster housing applications, immigrant housing, and income sharing projects based on income sharing model. It is seen that the number of houses built by TOKİ in connection with the government's development strategies has increased significantly in recent years. While approximately 44,000 residences were built by TOKİ between 1984 and 2002, this number exceeded 500,000 between 2003 and 2011. And TOKİ was planning to reach about 1 million residences in 2023. So after this earthquake and the recent policies, what was İlk Evim, this kind of plans developed by the government, probably it will increase very rapidly in the next couple of years. So in Turkey, the property status of the residents between the years 2006 and 2018 is shown in this figure. In 2002, about 61% of individuals were homeowners in their residences, while only 24% were tenants. By 2018, these rates were about 59% and 25%. These statistics show that despite the significant increase in the number of house sales and TOKİ projects, social housing projects, there has been no significant change in home ownership in Turkey. So this is very important, and if we have time, we can discuss further at the end. There is no such a big difference in 12 years, actually, from 2006 to 2018. Let's have a look at social protection policies. State institutions constitute one of the most important pillars of social assistance in Turkey. The Social Assistance and Solidarity Fund, Sosyal Yardımlaşma Dayanışma Teşvik Fonu in Turkish, was established in 1986 to help needy people and to ensure social justice in income distribution. Today, there are a total of about 1,000 Solidarity Fund in Turkey, in different provinces, in different districts. In addition to Solidarity Fund, municipalities and non-governmental organizations and the director of foundation have also some services for needy people in the field. As we saw during the recent earthquake, Red Crescent, İHA, and Ahbap, and some other organizations, some institutions, and some advocacy groups, they also supported needy people in the field. So after the AK Party came to power in 2002, social assistance has grown in terms of amount, scope, and target group. Today, there are about 33 active social assistance programs managed by the Ministry of Family and Social Services. 9 of these supports or social assistance programs are family benefits. 7 of them are education grants. 8 of them are health benefits. 5 of them are special purpose grants, and 4 of them are in the type of benefits for the elderly and disabled. While the share of total social protection expenditure in GDP was about 8% in 2000 in Turkey, it increased to about 12% in 2018. According to amount of expenditure, social assistance increased to a total of 636 billion lira in 2018. 39 billion lira conditional and 397 billion lira was unconditional transfers. So there's a huge increase in social protection expenditures during that period. The number of people receiving assistance in all types of disability has also increased rapidly in 2 decades. In addition to disabled people who receive a salary with the new regulations, the number of people in need who benefit from disability at home has also increased rapidly. While there were approximately 29,000 people benefiting from this support in 2007, this number increased to half million today. Due to the increase in the elderly population in Turkey, pension and elderly benefits increased from 40% in 2000 to 49% in 2018. We can also consider the Turkish welfare regime as an elderly supported welfare regime. So finally, let's talk about some of the important challenges ahead. We have very important global and internal challenges for the Turkish welfare regime. What are these risks or challenges? Economic risks, migration flows, demographic change, family transformation, and lastly, some political problems, populism and patronage. The first 2 are closely related with regional and global developments, while the others are mostly caused due to the Turkey's internal dynamics. Let's have a look at the economic risks very briefly. Socioeconomic challenges have led to claims of the crisis of the welfare state as a result of financial problems, especially after 1980s in the world. We are facing growing social expenditures, but in the meantime, we have some retrenchment policies in different welfare states in some areas. Technological developments and de-skilling are the main characteristics of the new era, in the new global era, we can say. Competitive global trade and profit maximization goals have led multinational companies to move their production to newly industrializing countries that have less regulation and less job security. The impact of outsourcing and the increase in precarious jobs also have a significant impact on unskilled workers and their social security in Turkey. In spite of high rates of GDP growth in the last 2 decades, Turkish unemployment rate has remained at around 10%. Continuous high unemployment poses a significant threat to the social security system, which is financed by the state through pay-as-you-go contributions based on employees, occupations, and direct state support from the public budget. According to estimates, in Turkey, there are about 5 million legal and illegal immigrants in Turkey today. There are 3 main reasons behind these migration flows in the last 2 decades. First, Turkey has become an economic and political power in the region over the last 2 decades. It was a kind of attraction region, we can say. Secondly, ongoing economic and political problems in the Middle East and recently in Ukraine definitely affected migration flows to Turkey. Thirdly, the reluctance of European countries and other rich countries to admit these immigrants has led people to turn their faces to Turkey. The policies of the recent government also affected migration flows. With regional unrest, economic problems, and global warming and some other developments will definitely affect migration flows, not only to Turkey, but also to other countries. But when we look at social policies for the migrants in Turkey, unfortunately, we don't have very detailed, very organized, long-run social policies for the migrants in Turkey. Even though the majority of the immigrants, particularly Syrian refugees, have access to some social policies, their status are not protected by the Turkish legislations. There is no long-run government strategy for Syrian migrants or other nationalities, and there's a great deal of public discontent about irregular or illegal immigrants, compounded by the Turkey's economic problems and high unemployment rates. Even though some Turks believe that immigrants are taking their jobs, most immigrants actually work in unstandardized, unsecured, and low-paid jobs, which Turkish citizens generally do not favor. Social and cultural biases against immigrants and the lack of policies to integrate them may increase the ethnic tensions between Turks and international immigrants. Hence, having young immigrants might be a big opportunity for the Turkish economy through proper adaptation policies. If these policies are not immediately applied, having a massive young immigrant population may instead bring new economic and social problems. Another important development is population aging, and population aging, as you all know, brings new risks, economic risks for the social policies in Turkey. The fourth one is family change. As you all know, family is experiencing very important structural change. Divorce rates are increasing in Turkey. Divorce rates are increasing in Turkey. People are postponing their marriage to their late 20s, early 30s. They all bring new demographic challenge as well as family challenge in Turkey. We all know that Turkish welfare regime is heavily based on family, as I mentioned. So the recent transformations or developments in family and increase in family instability will bring additional problems for the Turkish welfare regime. Another important feature of Turkish welfare regime is the role of populism and patronage in welfare distribution. As Ferrara pointed out, for the Southern European countries, populism and patronage are interconnected with the process of political mobilization and the establishment of the state institutions in this region. In Turkey, rapid urbanization has meant that populism and patronage have come to be considered as a general welfare distribution mechanism, and where clientelist relations have been strengthened by ongoing political tensions among political parties, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s. For instance, the decision to abolish the official retirement age in 1992 and ongoing imar afları or housing amnesty for unregistered buildings are some of the populist policies that have negatively affected the long-term sustainability of social policies. In conclusion, in this study or in this presentation, I argue that the Turkish welfare regime is undergoing significant transformations through the impact of internal and external dynamics. Contrary to what has been documented in other countries, it is difficult to argue that the Turkish welfare regime has transformed either into a liberal welfare regime dominated by the market actors or into a social democratic welfare regime based on a universalist and right-based system. While Turkey's European Union accession process, aging population, and increasing living standards have led the state to play a more active role in welfare of citizens, its increasing social expenditure have forced the state to collaborate with other actors, particularly the market and family. Populist policies and family-centered regulations used in the 1990s by different parties are still valid welfare distribution mechanisms in the last 2 decades. In the light of the particular challenge Turkey is facing in the 21st century, further empirical research is needed to elaborate the Turkish welfare regime. Given the multiple challenges to the Turkish welfare regime, any research contributing to the literature must have a broad and analytical perspective. Comparative studies focusing on Turkey and other welfare states are particularly needed to understand how and in what ways the Turkish case differs from that of other welfare regimes. Such comparisons can also help Turkey to draw lessons from aging welfare states where welfare institutions are already well established and their responses to similar socioeconomic challenges in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatih Aysan, for this really very rich presentation. Dr. Aysan talked about basically the social protection programs within the state of Turkey, particularly in the past 20 years. And he said that we need to understand this welfare regime and its impact on social policies. And he said much of the information he is providing is based on his field studies and surveys, where he has witnessed positive change to society with a vast amount of different welfare programs, where individuals depend on state services and where social policies try to address challenges. He said there were 2 dominant trends. One is path dependency, and the other is the significant increase in public social spending since the beginning of the 21st century. He talked about rapid increase in social spending, particularly based on the family as an important welfare player, but there are also structural factors influenced by the religious and traditional values, as well as the role of populism in politics. He said there are 4 main pillars within this structure, where the players are contributing to the spending and social programs: state, family, market, meaning private businesses, and local actors such as NGOs. We talked about the public social expenditure, going from about 4% of GDP in 1980s to about 15% by 2018 or 19 and then he made a comparison with the organization, the OECD, the developed countries, and he's shown that Turkey went from 2% in 1990 to about 8% in 2013. One example in the health industry where Turkey went up to 4% of GDP. It's the largest increase. And then it went from 4% to 14% in social spending, which is one of the highest increases in health. It's about 4% of GDP compared to 6% of the OECD. On education, he talked about formal education, and he gave many statistics where Turkey has also gone through momentous and significant changes. For example, the formal education reached about 95% in 2015. Higher education went from 15% to about 40% of those who are eligible. The compulsory education also reached significant numbers. And then he talked about the ratio between teacher to student and how significant it came down. He said that private schools have now more significant role to play in education. They have increased 8-fold in the past 20 years. And he gave some examples on high school. While in 97, the figure was 38%. By 2018, was about 84% in high school. He said that there were 16 million people that were supported in social security system in the 1970s. That number reached about 70 million in 2018. That's a very large number with limited population. And it has reached about 86% in 2018. Public pension is higher in Turkey than most advanced societies. And he gave the examples of Canada and Holland, where the highest increase over the years in terms of public pension. It covers about, he said, in the healthcare spending covers about 98% of the total population by 2015. That's as universal healthcare as you will ever get. And in terms of finance of healthcare services, he said that increased from 8 billion liras in 2000 to about 165 billion liras in 2018, while in 2000 the budget was 63% spent by government. That increased to 77%, while the household went from 28% down to 17%. Many other figures were there in terms of nursing homes, children homes, housing. His said housing went also from about 44,000 units built in 2000 by the government. That figure reached about 500,000 by 2011, and there is a goal of about 1 million residences in 2023, particularly after the disastrous earthquake. Even home ownership, he said home ownership is flat over the years, 61% to 59% now over the course of 12 years. There is no significant change in home ownership. And then he gave some figures about solidarity funds in Turkey, particularly with NGOs and government and different assistance programs. There is over 660 billion Turkish liras are spent in social protection spendings. Then he talked about challenges in terms of the economic risks, the impact of technology on employment, the migration flows, the demographic change, family changes, the impact of populism and political patronage to friends within the political class. He said also unemployment is high by the standards of advanced societies at 10%, and that needs to be addressed. He said there is a problem with immigration, where Turkey has over 5 million, and it is not an easy thing to deal with, even though the public perception is different. He pointed out to the different problems related to the issue of refugees. Then he talked about population, aging population, the fact that people are postponing marriage, and which impacts family, and also the dynamic situation of having young generations. And he ended with talking about the Turkish welfare regime, and that it has gone through significant transformation due to internal and external dynamics, which forced the state also to cooperate with other players. Thank you very much for our three presenters. Been very heavy morning. We do have about, I would say, close to 30 minutes. So we could allow for one round of questions if there are any from our audience here, and then we're gonna give each person to address the issues, whether raised by Dr. Munzir or the audience. I also have questions. If people do not ask, I will ask them. Can you please identify yourself and ask your question within 90 seconds? Thank you. Do you have a green light?
All right. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Muhammad Haroon Ibrahim. I'm a social scientist from Sudan. I teach. Okay. My name is Muhammad Haroon. I'm a social science professor from the University of Khartoum, Sudan. So thank you, Dr. Sami and the CIGA team for sustaining this series of conferences and discussions. I remember I took part, I think, in one of the first ones a couple of years back. So thank you for such a good work. I've maybe some comments rather than questions. One question, of course, is on the paper on Islamic finance in Turkey. There seems to be some growth in Islamic banking in Turkey, according to the presentation just shared with us. This is against the rate of growth in conventional banking. I just did not grasp your maybe some explanation for why such growth of Islamic banking institutions is taking place against conventional banking. On the paper by Dr. Muhammad Al-Fatih on social and welfare policies. Welfare kind of state commitments. There seems to be a diverse activities and also diverse institutions and covering areas of social and welfare policies. And this is something has to be also has to be encouraged, of course, and the state is rather to be seen further engaged in these areas of state responsibilities. Dr. Fatah talked about four players that are state, family, market, and local actors. To me, of the four actors, there appear to be two main actors, which are the state. Of course, the state remains the main actor, but also the market, with family and local actors, maybe even non-local actors, regional and international players, come next in role and level also of responsibility. The state is there, of course, and we have shared what the state is actually doing with regard to social and welfare policies and activities. But we just did not highlight how much the market is there. To me, the market is not just the private enterprises. The market is the total economic and economic institutions and activities within the national economy. Of course, with a focus on social enterprises in both the formal and informal sectors of the economy. The market, of course, is a main player, and where the market has not been well suited within the context of social and welfare policies in certain society, then comes challenges, if you don't say problems. Now people talk about capitalism, how it is now bringing about some severe social challenges. To me, the market has to be located, suited within a context of a state's social policy. There are now some insights, some theories, some practice actually within the context of what's called social economy. Can the Turkish state go for conceptualizing and adopting some models, a paradigm where the market can be more tuned into becoming a social economy kind of space.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you give the microphone next, please? Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sami Bey. Teşekkür ediyorum. My question goes to Murat Bey. I would ask about the better. Pardon. My name is Zeynep from Istanbul Medeniyet University, from International Relations Department. I would ask about the bad reputation of Islamic finance in Turkey. I remember 1990s, there was a case during Erbakan's period, Mercimek davası. Maybe you are too young to remember this case, but just giving this example, I would ask you, what is the basic reason for this bad reputation? Actually, you already mentioned us about a little bit the reasons, but can you a little bit more elaborate it?
Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdurrahman Miqdad. I'm an assistant professor of Islamic economics here at ISU. I'm sorry I came late, so actually I have a question to Dr. Hassan. My question is, we've seen the general transformations of the Turkish economy, family, aging population, etc. My question is, if you would take a benchmark as a model to maybe benefit from their experience, given the developments of Turkey, which would it be, considering the culture of Turkey, the main religion of the country? This is one question. Another question is, when comparing between Turkey and the other OECD countries, do you take into account the difference of population? Because basically the comparison is primarily based on the numbers, how much is spent, as far as I understand. So if that is the case, do you take into consideration, يعني مثلا, the population, the value of the healthcare cost, the value of the currency alongside, because يعني at an observation level, if I would compare between my own comparison, for example, the healthcare system in Turkey with that in Japan, I would see that it's rather close, right? It's not less. Even that of the Americans, for example, it's not less. So what I'm thinking about is do you take into consideration the value, how much things cost? Of course, there it costs very much. Here, the cost is less. But with regard to the services provided,
Purchasing power.
purchasing power, the value of currency, etc., are those elements taken into account when we make those comparisons? So those are my two questions. Last, just a quick comment. When you say the love houses for the kids, it's basically what you mean is the sevgi evleri, the orphans, yani needy. Okay, so it's just the orphans.
Dar item.
So it's a more organized system.
More.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. Aslan. Yes. Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Ömer Aslan. I'm from Ankara Yıldırım Beyazıt University International Relations Department. So I have a question to Mehmet Babacan Hoca, maybe. Since we are talking about Islamic movements and this is the case of Turkey, maybe it would be a good idea to take stock of this particular movement here in power, of course, for the last now since 2002. Just can you compare or maybe take stock of their approach to economy? How their approach to economic governance has changed over the years from the beginning. I know this is a long, time period. Maybe you cannot take this in a couple of minutes, but just what is your sense of how they are approaching? Because I think we have been seeing some very unconventional moves too for the last maybe 3 years. So what do you make of it? That's my question.
Thank you. Anybody else? السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. جزاكم الله خيرا على هذا يعني المؤتمر مرة ثانية، وأنا أشعر بالعزة مرة ثانية في هذه الجامعة، جامعة صلاح الدين زعيم، وشكر خاص للدكتور سامي وكل من حضر وحضر وجميع الحاضرين موجودين هنا وعلى الزوم. الأسئلة للدكتور باباجان أولا، يعني ما هو شكل المعايير التي تفرضها أوروبا على تركيا في عملية التصدير، وهل هي ضمن النطاق الاقتصادي المتعارف عليه دوليا أم أن هناك نوع من الاستعلاء الأوروبي في التعامل مع تركيا؟ بمعنى آخر، هل تركيا راضية عن الأداء الاقتصادي البيني بينها وبين أوروبا أم أن هناك ملاحظات جوهرية تحتفظ بها تركيا لنفسها وتحاول تجاوزها؟ وهل هذه العلاقة لها دلالات سياسية ذات علاقة بالتاريخ التركي والأوروبي؟ لأنه لا نستطيع أن نفصل السياسة عن الاقتصاد يعني مهما حاولنا. السؤال الثاني، كلنا يعلم نعم، آسف على السرعة، أساس الوقت أنا بس يعني باخد بالحسبان. نعم. للدكتور شكرا جزيلا على الملاحظة. كلنا يعلم نعم كلنا يعلم أن الغرب بقيادة أمريكا والشرق بقيادة روسيا والصين إذا جاز لي التعبير يتنازعون حاليا على ثروات المنطقة العربية والنفوذ فيها، على قاعدة أن السياسة هي الصوت المرتفع للاقتصاد طبعا والثروة، خاصة عندما يتحول الأمر إلى نزاع أو صراع. هل تركيا التي حكمت هذه المنطقة أو العالم العربي حصريا 400 عام راضية عن أدائها ونفوذها بشكل عام وخاصة اقتصاديا في المنطقة العربية بكل ما لموقع الدول العربية أو المنطقة العربية من دلالات استراتيجية في الجيوسياسية أو الجيوسياسية العالمية؟ وهنا هل يعتقد العدالة أنه قدم البديل لتركيا أو البديل الأفضل لتركيا ضمن الاقتصاد الإقليمي والعالمي المعقد طبعا الذي لا ينكره أحد، أم أن هناك الإمكان أفضل مما كان ومما هو كائن وما يجب تحصيل حاصل وما يجب أن يكون؟ Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. شكرا.
Thank you so much. Okay, my question is also, I have many questions, but I will ask the first one only for Mr. Mehmet Babacan. As we all know that strong states or governments should have their own food or agriculture security, medicine, pharmaceutical security, and defense or weapon security. So here in Turkey, for example, I'm a Turkish citizen, and our salary. By example, I forgot to identify myself. My name is Nihad Abu Nasir from TÜBİTAK. So we get, you can say, high salary in TÜBİTAK, but in these economical crises, your price still, you can't buy what do you want because of this crisis. So you can understand the fuel prices. So it's high. That's why the prices is high. But the global wave should not affect all things in Turkey from A to Z. For example, Turkey is a textile country. So why the textile prices not doubled, but it came, so expensive. I want to understand this as, a regular citizen. When you go to buy bread, they tell us that we have a crisis, we have the dollar, but why? I have many things to ask, but we have this time issue. So thank you so much.
Okay, anyway, please, I'm going to give each participant 8 minutes. I hope it's enough. But also for Dr. Babacan, I really wanted you to address the issue of debt. The debt that has been accumulated over the years and how it is impacting. And if you can go very quickly, just bullet points about the reason that we have that we have reached this inflationary pressure in Turkey, and whether this could be compared to a former era, or this is something transient. Is it possible that the Turkish lira will go up again, or are we in a situation where this is going just to go down, down, down until a point where we have to reevaluate? Where do you see the issue of inflation? Because I think this is what Nihad is trying to get at, whether the Turkish average citizen should be worried about the value of their money, of their wealth, of their assets, of their income, and so on and so forth. I'm going to stop this because there are I had a lot of other questions for our two speakers, but since many questions have been answered, I'm going to stop here. Give each speaker about 8 minutes. That will give us up to about 1:30. Then we'll move on.
Well, I think I'll begin with the questions, the bigger ones, and try to make it as short as possible. So the shortest answers for biggest questions. I know it's going to be quite hard, but for instance, the question I received from Ömer Hoca is by itself is a distinct topic to be discussed. I mean, it's all about the approach, the mindset altogether in accordance with the economic policy design in Turkey. Yeah, it's hard to name it, but I think the easiest way forward to name this approach have been a hybrid one, because altogether, even within the course of the first 5 years of AK Party government, I think we still had got this hybrid mode. On one hand, we had the full-fledged ongoing privatizations, all in line with the Kemal Dervish type of experimentation in Turkey. And on the other hand, meantime, we had all this, as suggested by Dr. Fatih Aysan also, all this social security policy, and even the health care system altogether was a substantial change, even though it was suggested by the World Bank policies again. But that kind of changes, both meantime was aiming at making the whole social policy in a better mode, but also remaining, keeping the whole macro environment intact. I mean, pretty much I want to emphasize the role of finance in that regard, which is pretty much has been like a curse over the last course of 3 years. So the role of finance is an important one to be discussed. Altogether, my perspective was all relying upon the real sector issues, pretty much having a foreign trade and investment focus. But obviously, we should take a look at the financial flows and financial developments as a complementary but distinct topic. So I think that hybrid mode is still on, but obviously we have to discuss different phases of this hybrid mode with different, let's say, upper hands in place in terms of economic policy designs. Obviously, we've got a major change in our analysis, which may play out certainly a bigger role to account for, is this system change, this political regime change back in 2018. So pros and cons are all on the table, but presidential system, yes, being adopted like 5 years before now. Well, the role of finance, now going back to this this curse issue, I mean, it was altogether preparing the level playing field but leveling the playing field, but it was meantime providing a certain amount of welfare effect, which wasn't actually primarily accounting for the output gains in Turkey, but rather it was all about those financial flows that made the currency pretty much appreciated, kept it for a long time, like for 10 years period. That was quite a good story for maintaining the macro balances. That's true. The macro indicators were all in good shape. Even we had an inflation of the CPI of like around 6% back in early 2013s. But for the last 2-3 years period, we had all this actually overturning again. I mean, now we had the other side of the story. Once we had all these difficulties due to several different reasons. I mean, I may count on partly on the political story, but we may have got actually this central banking issues, the policy designs around interest rate, etc. So altogether, it was manifesting itself in this high inflationary period, the hardship of maintaining both or engaging in both the conventional monetary and financial system altogether, and meantime, looking after for some other policy choices domestic wise. Most of it can be attributed to the populism. The electoral populism began back in 2015, right in between the first electoral vote in which AK Party was just a little bit, sliding down, and then regained its popularity back in November. So up until now, for the last course of this 8 years, it's been leaning towards more and more populism. That's true. And that may be all visible in social security, even as Fatih Hoca was mentioning about, and other type of expenditures, both to reinforce the position, the governing party's position. But the other side of the story was this actually eventually rising correlation with the world economic developments and Turkey's course. So, as much as you get more integrated, as much as you get more engaged in both the financial industry and, of course, obviously, towards the other countries through the bilateral economic relations, obviously you've got more repercussion effects in that wise. So beginning with the presidential system, it was altogether a change in the sentiment, not only in the eyes of the investors, the foreign investors, but also the geopolitical and other actors as well. Right after the announcement of the cabinet, this new cabinet, it was altogether beginning with the repositioning of the investors. Withdrawal of money, significant amounts of money. It wasn't even true during the coup d'etat days back in 2016, or let's say those airport. It was only the airport, the Istanbul Atatürk airport blows and other type of terrorist attack period that we had such a huge withdrawal. But then it rebounded within weeks, not even months. But after this presidential system and the announcement of the cabinet, it was quite deliberate, into my opinion. I guess it was quite a try of the new government. And of course, altogether, it was testing the resilience, and it's been the way forward up to now that the Turkish banking system has been actually tested for many times. Of course, on top, we may quote there are so many other type of primary reasons for driving up the huge inflation. Energy and food prices, of course, are the main drivers for Turkey's case. And of course, we lack a proper, and long-term strategy for those several significantly important industries, such as agriculture. This is all true, and I remember it's still been on the table. It's like the case of Islamic finance, the revival of Islamic finance throughout the public intervention back in early 2000s. It's quite the same. We had this altogether, the motivation for changing the code and trade, the laws and bylaws for trade environment or the business environment in Turkey. Ticaret Kanunu, it took more than 10 years to update it. We are still in discussion of, let's say, changing the taxation policy, the taxation system altogether. It was even proposed by the previous minister, Berat Bey's period. So, he was so outspoken that I had to refer to him. So those structural issues, unfortunately, are on place. It's quite similar to the case of inflation. One final point for the inflationary outlook. If that sentiment I was referring to in my presentation wouldn't change, if people's sentiment or benchmarking doesn't change. They do a simple benchmarking. Let's say they do get one item that has this huge price inflation, inflationary period, then they take it as a benchmark. Once you had all this price surge in, let's say, car prices or housing, whatever, then it becomes a benchmarking on top of the other, and mostly cost-driven, production-wise inflation. Thank you. Is it possible to come down? It is, but obviously we have to get some more complementary items in terms of little bit, not maybe significantly changing, but little bit alterations in the current economic policy, especially the central banking part.
Thank you very much for the question. Should I also answer the comments of the? Okay. So first of all, Professor Muzir Khaf, he made some comments. He first asked me to compare the case of Turkey with another country. Actually, I have another presentation that I compare the case of Turkey and Malaysia in this context. So I can share with him if he's interested, or anyone who is interested, I can share. So in that scenario, Malaysia's political support or determination for Islamic finance industry was more stable compared to Turkey. So that's why they had more sustainable growth of the industry. And also the Professor Muzir Khaf commented that actually the result is not something unexpected. Many countries experience similar situation, like he gave some examples from Nigeria and other countries. But actually many studies ignore this issue. They don't consider the political issue as an explanation for growth of the industry. I think it is because that mostly the policies of countries don't change in short time. It's more stable regarding Islamic finance, while some countries' policies can change quite dramatically. So in that sense, maybe Turkey can be a good example how this policy changes can affect the growth of the industry. And regarding other comment, Professor Mohammed, right? You asked whether what was the reason for the high growth of Islamic finance industry, right? In the case of Turkey. So Turkey is like we consider 98%, 99% Muslim country, and when we make interviews, or not interview but surveys regarding the Islamic finance industry, usually like the demand is like a 20-30% from the public. And the latest survey I checked is done by the presidency's finance office, and they ask people what is the first criteria when you make an investment. The 11% of these participants said the being Sharia compliant, being Islamic, is their first criteria when they make investment. So this is showing like the potential is still like a minimum like around 20-30%. So when we look at the market size, like it's still like less than 10% at the moment, so it's still below the potential. So that means that if there is like a healthy environment for the Islamic financial markets, the sustainable growth is very normal. So considering that the growth reached from like a 4% market share to 8%, it is not something extraordinary. That is like just realizing the potential of the market. And the second question, Prof. Zeynep asked me about the reputational risk of the Islamic finance industry in the case of Turkey. There have been, yes, several cases of reputational risk. Reputational risks are not just for Islamic finance industry. At the moment, we see many US banks start to bankrupt, right? It's Silicon banks. So all kinds of bad practices are causing actually reputational risk. Especially at the early stage of the Islamic finance industry in Turkey, the market was very new and the practices were also very new. Like they tried some of the institutions, they want to implement some authentic practices like a real trading, buying lands, etc. But however, that kind of practice is far from conventional banking practices, right? So in some of the cases, they face liquidity risk, especially when there is a financial crisis. And if I consider especially the years of 2000s, the Sharia non-compliance risk caused the main reputation risk problem, because there was not a central Sharia governance mechanism in Turkey. The government didn't want to intervene Sharia governance issues too much because of, I think, also again because of secularism concern. So it was like a free market of fatwas done by participation banks, and maybe it was possible of existence of fatwa shopping, by participation banks, like some of them says halal for some practices, while others are more strict. So we have seen this like in some of the products, like the, for example, income revenue index bonds, for example. Like at the beginning, government start to use this instrument as an alternative for sukuk before using sukuk. And later some Sharia, Hayrettin Karaman intervened, and he said they didn't use it, as I mentioned. So this is not Sharia compliant. Suddenly it affects the reputation of the industry because of lack of Sharia governance mechanism. Another problem was at the early stage, again, lack of standards and regulations for the Islamic financial institutions being regulated under special finance houses, gave them so much unique practices, enabled them for many unique practices that are not regulated as conventional banks. So they went beyond conventional banking practices and created greater risks in those years,
But
especially.
But that again was due to the cold shoulder they were getting from the government, right? I mean, it was like, acting differently. Separating those two industries, and it was like showing a cold shoulder to the Islamic finance industry. So they didn't have any room for getting regulated even for years, right?
Yeah, maybe at the beginning they were kind of experimenting, like whether they should imitate conventional ones or they should be unique practices or not. I think first 10, 15 years were kind of, that is my opinion, kind of experimentation for Islamic finance industry. After 2000s, they wanted to imitate conventional practices more, like Malaysia or other countries. Future, yeah, I think still the industry face political risks, in my opinion, still, but the establishment of state-owned Islamic banks kind of still giving some promises about its sustainability. But I think I also intervened some key people from industry. Still many regulatory bodies, they don't want to intervene because of future concerns. And I also heard from some people from industry that there is a concern that the elections can affect the future of industry. Like even if it doesn't affect like before too much, but still can affect, because they told me like even government didn't allow them open new branch before in end of 1990s and early 2000s. Even their checks were not accepted. Like they had such kind of difficult moments. But I think that will not repeat that much. But still, maybe the government support can decrease and it can come to more neutral sites. That kind of future is possible. Yeah, it takes place. Yeah. Otherwise, it will continue like this, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. Finally, Dr. Aysam.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to keep it short. When we look at the welfare state literature, we generally see literature focusing on public expenditures. Actually, S. Pink Anderson in 1990, he was opposed to this trend and he added these pillars, these welfare actors, namely family, state, and market. I added local actors or non-governmental organizations to this framework. And we call it actually not welfare state, welfare regime. Welfare regime is a broader concept to understand welfare distribution in different societies. So when we look at the roles of these pillars or institutions in individuals' welfare, we must also remember the individual's age, class, whether he is rich or not, his gender actually, whether male or female, and his or her race. So all of these factors definitely affect what is providing welfare, either market or state or family. In Southern European welfare regimes, for instance, state plays a very important role for the elderly, not for the kids, for instance. Okay, there are huge literature on this issue. In the United States, for instance, if you are an African American, your share from the welfare is very limited compared to white Anglo-Saxon American, etc., etc. When we look at my data, respondents say that the state and family play an important role. But in Turkey, if you go back to Turkey and your question or your comment, the role of the market, when I say market, I mean private institutions, private schools, private hospitals, private pension plans, etc., etc. The role of the market or private institutions, they are significantly increasing in the last 3 decades. We compare different countries with Turkey, but Turkey is a very unique case, it seems to me. It has some similarities with Middle Eastern countries, as well as Southern European welfare states. There are also some similarities with liberal countries, especially the United States. So therefore, it is very difficult to have a benchmark or compare with a specific country. When we compare different countries, we generally look at GDP levels. So GDP provides a basis to compare different countries, but we must also take into consideration particularly their population size, and their aging level. As you all know, in aging countries, there are more health services or health expenses and pension expenses for the citizens, for sure. So that's my answers to your comments. Aging, it's one of the fastest aging country population. It is now 10% of the population is over 65, and in 2050 it will be 25%. It is one of the fastest with Bangladesh actually. Bangladesh is also very aging very fast because of the very significant decline in fertility rates. We can discuss in the break maybe. We don't have time. I have some ideas about that.
I am one of those 10% now. Thank you so much for our three presenters. This was fascinating discussion. We're going to have another fascinating discussion at 3 o'clock, which would discuss defense and security policies with three distinguished professors as well. Now we have time for lunch.
So, done here.